his chance of not being reelected, I think at this point is so great because of those numbers.
Filmmaker Michael Moore was on CNN and delivered what I think is an incredibly important message to President Joe Biden. That, of course, he likely will not hear, will not care, but this is the kind of advice that he should be listening to, especially given the context of what Michael Moore has predicted in the past and the context of what is going on right now. So before I get to the clip, this is what is going on right now. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, this is from Monday, 2 days ago. Anthony Blinken says the leadership in Gaza is the only thing standing in the way of a ceasefire after extraordinarily generous Israeli offer. 2 days ago. This is today from Brooke Ravid, an Axios reporter. Netanyahu told Blinken during their meeting today that he won't accept a deal that will include ending the war. Meaning Netanyahu is against any kind of ceasefire. It's very important to drive this point home because I think this has been often lost in just the months of coverage of this. There has been a ceasefire deal on the table since October from Gaza that Netanyahu has rejected again and again and again. This is an article from November from The Guardian. Netanyahu rejected ceasefire for hostages deal in Gaza. This was for... So the original deal on the table involved freeing children, women, and elderly and sick people in exchange for a 5-day ceasefire. But the Israeli government turned this down and demonstrated its rejection with the launch of the ground offensive. This was just a 5-day ceasefire. And even still, Netanyahu rejected this. This goes on to January. From the Financial Times here. Israeli hostage relatives storm parliament as Benjamin Netanyahu rejects Gaza truce. So the families in Israel are very aware what Netanyahu is doing here. That this deal is on the table, that he is rejecting it simply for his political benefit. Because once this ends, once Israel's bombardment of Gaza ends, Netanyahu is gone. He's being held up by a far-right faction in Israel. He is serving that far-right faction by continuing this ongoing bombardment. If he stops that, if he brings peace, he's done. He is prioritizing his own position over the lives of these hostages. This gets to February. Once again, Netanyahu rejects Gaza ceasefire deal and says victory is within reach. This was a deal to release all of the hostages. And once again, Netanyahu is the one that rejected it. He is the barrier to peace here. Now, before I get to the Michael Moore clip, the reason why this applies, or why this is relevant to Joe Biden, is because the U.S. government are the ones that are both funding and supplying the far right-wing Israeli government and Netanyahu with weapons for their ability to continue this ongoing bombardment, for their ability to continue rejecting a ceasefire deal. If there were some strings attached here, if there was any attempt at all to put conditions on aid to Israel, that would, at the very least, be an attempt to try and stop what Netanyahu is doing here. This gets to Michael Moore on CNN.
There's a CNN poll that showed today 81% of voters who are under the age of 35 disapprove of how President Biden has been handling this war. I mean, we're seeing it on campuses. There is a question of what we're going to see in November. I wonder what you think he should be doing differently to change those numbers.
Thank you for asking that question, Caitlin. This is why I was when I got the call asking if I'd like to come on tonight, I really was coming on. I know we're speaking to millions of people, but I'd like to speak to one particular individual, and that is President Biden. I wanted to say this on your show tonight, that his chance of not being reelected, I think at this point is so great because of those numbers, because he's losing the youth vote. He's lost the Arab American vote in Michigan. So even Michelle Goldberg, in a column in the New York Times last month, said that you lose Michigan, you lose the election. I am fighting to make sure that doesn't happen. I am trying to save Joe Biden, because as soon as he does the right thing, and if you're listening, watching Mr. Biden, fellow Catholic, although some will say recovering in my case, but still, we are Catholics, and the Pope is right on this. We need an immediate ceasefire. It is wrong. A mass slaughter of innocents, of children, of women, of the elderly is a sin. It is absolutely against what we believe in. I know you know that too. I know that's why you're not really happy with what Netanyahu has done here. And you can stop the killing tonight. You pull the plug, you close the bank, you shut it down.
All right. Now, what Michael Moore is saying here is, of course, exactly on point. There's a bit of a cheesiness to this simply because he's acting like he's talking to Joe Biden. Joe Biden is not listening. He doesn't care. But this is the kind of message that people need to hear, that people with Biden's ear need to hear and need to utilize themselves when talking with Joe Biden and those that are around him. Because this is Michael Moore. His history on, I wouldn't call them predictions because they're informed opinions, but his history is clear on the last several elections. He made a once shocking prediction that Trump would win long before anyone else thought that was possible. He went on to say that Trump would likely mess with the 2020 election, which he did after he lost and claimed that he didn't lose. And then he also predicted that Democrats would win big at the midterms, when a lot of media was saying the opposite, and Democrats did win big at the midterms. This is Michael Moore's message here. It goes right in line with not even just, of course, young voters generally, but also it's important, again, to counter the narrative that because you're Jewish, you must support what the Israeli government is doing. That's insane. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Nearly half of young Jewish voters feel Biden overly supports Israel. Jewish voters understand, Jewish people understand that what the Israeli government does not represent them, and they don't want it to represent them. As I've discussed many times, a lot of the voices in the protests going on right now, and just generally the anger and the criticism of both Biden's support of Netanyahu and the criticism of Netanyahu himself, a lot of that is organized by Jewish voices. There's Jewish Voice for Peace, Independent Jewish Voices. A lot of Jewish groups are the ones at the forefront of the human rights fight for Palestinians. So it's important not to conflate the two things here as if they're the same. And I've done enough videos discussing all this. I hope it's obvious at this point that they're not the same. But if you're new to this, they are very different things. And it's important, once again, to ensure that people understand what needs to be done, both to end the mass slaughter of civilians in Gaza, but also if you're someone that is afraid of a Trump presidency again, the best thing to do is not to try and talk down to people who are vocally critical of the obvious garbage that Biden is supporting, but instead use your voice to join them in the fight against what is going on right now and ensure there is pressure put on the Biden administration to put some pressure on the Israeli government to end this mass slaughter.